Okay, good morning. I just want to let everybody know this is Don's Deere maintenance program. I'm just kind of like trying to give people an easy way out of getting things done on this John Deere. This is the X738. I bought it in May 2020. So it adds things to go. I just did the 50-hour maintenance on this. I went through a couple of videos. You can watch them if you want. But I just want to let you know that this is my idea of doing this. This is not the real way or the right way or the manufacturer's way, just my way of doing this maintenance. Try to make it easier and cleaner and save you some money. So that's all I was trying to do. So here it is with the hood off. Put the hood over there to clean it up a little bit, maybe put a little coat of wax on it. Here comes the heater. So talk to you later. Yeah, I was just wondering if anybody wanted to know. It's pretty easy to take the hood off this tractor. All you have to do is unplug this lead cable here. This cable comes off, just push this tab back and pull this off, and that lets the harness go off. This just sits there on the rubber mounts, no big deal. You can leave that on. You loosen up this bolt here from the inside here and then here. 10 millimeter, just loosen it up. And the hood's got a fork. It just fits down inside here. And you can just get it at a certain spot, grab the front and the back. It's not heavy, and just pick it right up. And then you can put it right back down the same way. All they are is like just a riding spot. There's a little cam there. And that just spins with the hood when it goes up and down. But that's easy to take the hood off. You can get to your battery. It might be easier to do any cleaning in here if you want. If there's any leaves or anything up in there. This gets hot with a muffler, so you don't want to touch that if you just got done running the machine. But it gives you an easy way to get to all this stuff if you want to do any work up here. And I just wanted to make sure to let you know that it is pretty easy to do. There's the hood, and like I say, it's not a big deal. It's really light. It probably only weighs maybe 5 pounds. There's nothing to it. Just sits on these forks. There's the forks. They're pretty easy to get to. They just sit right on there. And here's the harness. They unplug, and you can get right to it real easy. They just sit on here, and then this thing rides on that cam. So it's pretty easy. Here's a handle here, a handle here. Just set it up. Just be careful you don't scratch it. But that's the easy way to take the hood off. That's for sure. Okay, so just in case you wanted to know, there it is. Removing the hood. It makes it a lot easier for you to work on anything, especially if you want to check your battery out or change your battery. That's how you do it. Okay, I made a little cart so I can push my deck around when I'm working on it. So here's what I got to do, put it all back together. I think I'm going to clean it up a little bit more. I don't think it really needs to, because as soon as you run it, first time you run it, it gets kind of dirty. But I took these rollers out and greased them up really good, put a couple extra washers in there, so that's good. So we're ready to clean it up, put it back together. The rollers are all cleaned up. We're going to clean all these dirt grease fittings up. I rebuilt the spindles for the blades, cleaned them all up, put new grease in them, so they're all ready to go. So hopefully they'll last a couple years. So I just drained all the oil out of the gearbox. There's really no way to get the oil out unless you prop it up like I have it now and let it drain. I let it drain. It took about a little bit came out, but not much, so I think it was low. So I'm going to get the right oil for it on the dealer tomorrow. And I greased the fittings, the U-joints here, and the spline shaft. So we're ready to put it back together and see what's going to happen. The John Deere saga goes on. So we're ready for the winter. Well, we finished the oil change and the transmission and front axle and rear axle change. So now we got everything filled up, got some more oil, put it in. Now we're going to go ahead and put the deck together. So I decided to clean up the bottom of the deck. We primed it and we painted it with some kind of a sealer, kind of like Z-Bart, but it dries real smooth and it's real abrasive paint. So it takes 72 hours for it to actually dry 100%, but I got all winter, so it'll dry by then. So now we're going to go ahead and put it all back together. So we're going to start with putting the gearbox on and the belt, and just go step by step. We have all these parts. So we filled the gearbox with brand new oil, drained it all out, greased the U-joints and the spline shaft and the coupler. And before I put these bogey wheels on, I'm going to grease them up real good and clean them up. And all the parts are here, so we're getting ready to throw her back together, and step by step. So here we go. The hardest part, I think, is getting the belt on the pulleys correctly. You can't have them backwards because it'll run backwards, so you got to make sure you get those right. So we're going to start with a gearbox, step by step. Okay, so I put the spindles all on, tighten them all up really good, and it's not a real big thing, but what I always do is, these blades get a lot of water and wet rain and snow, and not snow but grass on them. So I always take a little never sees and just put it on these threads, a little bit on here, so the blades get on, put on there right, and the threads never get wet. You got to make sure these washers are beveled. You got to make sure you put the washer on the right way. If you drop them, they go beveled in towards the blade, so it pushes on the outside of the blade in this area here. And then basically what you do, I sharpen the blades really good, balanced them. They're really sharp. You got to be careful you don't cut yourself. But the blades definitely go one way. You can't put them backwards. They have a little spot where they line up, and they find center. Put the bolt in, and I snug it up by hand. Most of the time I use an impact gun on here, but I'm not going to fire the air compressor up right now. But you can just take a 18mm or a 3/4 socket, and you can tighten these up pretty good like this. Just make sure you don't cut yourself on your sharp blades. And then what I always do is smack them with a dead blow hammer. Then they're nice and tight. Won't come loose when you're cutting the grass, but you give them a good blow, it just racks it in place. I just put it like that. That's all you gotta do, just tighten them up. One good smack. Once they're tight, you're good to go. Just give them one good, if you want, you can hit them a couple times, but they're pretty tight. Once you get the belt back on, you can tighten them up a little bit more if you want. But just make sure, what I always check is make sure that the two blades are in line with each other. They should be perfectly in line with each other. And these two should be in line with each other. Because if one's down or up, that means something's bent here. The pan of the deck itself could be bent. But you want to make sure they have clearance, which is not, doesn't have to be much, but you want to make sure that these blades are level. This area right here should be level, and this area here should be level. No matter what side of the blade it's on, they should be level. You can double check by checking them like this, in case the blade itself is bent. But that's how you check, make sure that they're good, ready to go. Here goes my heater. Fired up my heater to keep the garage a little warm. Letting this special paint dry. It's like a Z-Bart. This protects the deck from rusting. I definitely don't want it to rust. Some of these people I see online, their decks are all rusted out. They have to weld in hubs and put washers on it and all kinds of stuff. So being this deck's not even a year old yet, it'll be a year old in May, it was pretty rusty. I couldn't believe it. So I wire brushed it all and primed it and painted it with this special coating. I think if you just paint it with regular paint, it's going to be better than not doing nothing at all, because this is aluminum, so you don't have to worry about that. And I'll show you what I did on the other side real quick, just to help out when I put it all back together. This is ready to go down here. So all this area here is dead space, but it's all coated. All this area here is dead space and it's all coated. So I don't have to worry about it rusting. It can just, even when I store it, the water could lay in there and rust it out. This is going to keep it good. The other side's painted with yellow paint, so they're good on that side. But the bottom of the blade, these are sharp, like razor blades. They don't need to be that sharp, but I left them that sharp. So I'm good to go. Everything's clear, everything's good. The mulching kit's off right now, so basically it's just for discharge, for picking up leaves and stuff. That's the last thing I did last year, so I probably use it like this for a couple cuts to pick up all the debris for the winter, and then I'll put the mulching kit back on. I'll show you a video when I go to do that. But everything's good. I got clearance all the way around. The blades aren't hitting. The spindles are all rebuilt. I'll show you a little picture about how I rebuilt the spindles. And to rebuild them, I just packed the bearings with grease. All right, let me see what it looks like on the other side. Okay, on this side, kind of looks funny. But what I did is, these bolts that hold the spindles in place are always rusty. Mine are less than a year old, so they're not bad, but they started showing signs of rust. So what I did, once I torqued them tight, I pushed the grease fittings in the right direction so I can get to the grease fittings with the grease gun once the deck is on. But what I did is I just took some silicone, some blue silicone, and just covered the nut, the bolt, and the threads. So now they can't get any water to them, and they'll definitely stay nice and dry and won't corrode. And all you gotta do is when you get ready to take them off again, you just pull that rubber off. It's just like a rubber pad. You just twist it off, it comes right loose. And also, these are tabs. When they weld the baffle on the other side, John Deere welds only one side. The other side is subject to water and leakage. So what I did is I just greased with a little bit of that silicone to keep the water out of there, because the water just lays in there and starts to rust. And I don't know if there's any paint in there or not, but all these areas that have the tabs sticking through, I'm going to get this one next and this one next. After that, you can see it. I left this off because we weld one side. This side just lays in and water can get right inside there and just fill with water and corrosion, and it'll all rust out. Same with these. These are brackets for some attachment, but they only weld one side of it, so the other side is subject to a lot of corrosion. So I'm going to go ahead and did that just to save it. I have this bungee strapped open because this is the cover for that pulley, so it's part of this bracket which holds it on with those bolts, so I have to put it on now. So we'll go to the next step now, see what happens. I still have some parts to put on. I think I'm going to throw the gearbox on next. Okay, we got the gearbox back on, the drive belt. We put the pulleys on and finished up putting some silicone on the splice joints where the baffles are on the bottom of the deck. And I noticed we got ready to put the idler pulley on, which basically keeps the belt tight. And I noticed that there's a bushing in here. There's no way to grease it. It's just a little dry socket, and maybe that's good, I don't know. But and there's no way. There's a bearing in here. There's no way that there's no grease fitting on this bearing. So I think I'm gonna pop this apart real quick to see if there's a way to grease that bearing, and put a little grease on here, because there's no way to. That just sits in that and just runs all day long. It doesn't move much, but this spins just as fast as the blades do. So I packed all the spindle bearings, took the inside seals out so I could get to the grease when I greased them, because you can get right in there with a grease gun and pump it up. So let's see what happens when I take this apart. Like I expected, there's no way to grease this bearing. So what I did is I took a needle greaser and just kind of squeezed a little grease in the bearing right through the little seal. So just a little needle sealer. It's a really kind of heavy duty oil, but it does the job. So took care of that problem. So now we can put this back together. There's not a whole lot to it, but definitely no way to grease that bearing for sure. Okay, well, I greased it up a little bit, put a little oil, heavy oil in there, and tightened up this. I put this head of this bolt right in the vise. So now this turns very simple. It was kind of sticky before. Now I did that, tightened it up pretty good, and I also greased this up. I put a little grease on there, so that's all I got, grease in it. So now this is good to go. So I'm going to put this back together and see what it looks like. But now look at that. That pulley is probably designed when it makes noise. You just buy a new pulley with a bearing installed, so you just change it every year, every 2 years or whatever. Let's see what happens when I put it back together. Okay, it's all back together. The bearing spins good, the pulley spins. I've noticed that this spring has been, on lots of videos, very hard to put on. The best way to put this spring on that I found is leave this belt off this front pulley, this main pulley here. And you can just basically lift this spring right up. See, it's on here like this. This goes all the way up. You just lift this spring right up, pop it right on place. Then, this is what this is for. Put a big crescent wrench on here, and you can twist this thing any way you want. But you can bring it down to where it's supposed to be, like this. Put all the slack in that belt you want, and then you can put it like that. This bounces like this all day long. So basically the spring is not hard to put on if you do it like that. It makes it a lot easier. Now everything turns together. Drive shaft turns. Everything turns with the gearbox. It's a lot simpler to put it on like that. And now that this bearing has got some heavy oil in it, it's not seized up, I'll keep an eye on this. Everything's good. And I'm going to tighten up these bolts all the way with the gun after I get the air compressor built up with some air. Alright, and I'll put this back up here just to hold this open so I can get to this bolt. These are tight, but I'm going to run them with the gun and the blades, so they're super tight. Okay, after lunch. Okay, I aired up the air compressor. I'm going to tighten up these spindle. You don't have to tighten them real tight, but it's a 22 millimeter socket, extension socket. I'm going to tighten them up. That one's tight. That one's tight. That one's tight. So basically everything's put together now. That's good, that's good. Spring's on, tension's good, the belt's on right, pulleys are on right. Just a thought, I took a picture before I took it apart, so I could definitely have to stay away from the manual and put it back together, but definitely good way to check to make sure everything's back together right. Having it up in the air like this makes a big difference. I just kind of clamped it to the bench up there and jack that side up with a jack, and I put a safety chain up there just in case. But let's go around and tighten up the blades on the other side. I did them with a socket and a hammer, but I'm going to go ahead and, now that I got the air compressor aired up, I'm going to snug them up with that so they don't go flying off. But they're probably okay, but I'm going to do it anyway. But I went ahead and silicone the rest of these tabs and the top of these bolts too, just to keep the water off the threads. Everything's good. I put a little never seized behind these, so they're good to go. So let's check on the other side, see what's going on. Okay, so I'm sure the blades are tight enough, but let's just see what happens when I use the gun. This is a 18 millimeter socket, extension socket, so it's just a long socket, don't have to be, but keeps you away from the blades. Now what I do is I put my hand on the back side of the blade. This is sharp. Put my hand on the back side. I snug them up a little bit. Put the hand on the back side. The back side. Okay, they're definitely tight. I put a little silicone on here just to keep the bolts from rusting. That way when I go to take them off at the time to put the mulching blades on, they won't be so rusted up, dirty and corroded. This is drying up pretty good. The directions say that this paint takes like 2 days to dry, like 48 hours, so it's still a little tacky, but it's starting to tack up. But I think this is going to keep the deck from rusting for sure. We'll be okay. Alright, next is trying to get this thing back down on the ground for storage. I'm going to put it away for the winter for sure. Yeah, it's kind of funny how you take things for granted. These bogey wheels, basically scalping wheels or rollers, they don't really touch the ground much, but they do when you spin around the corner and stuff. They take a beating because you hit the fence posts and the trees and stuff with them. But you take a 15mm wrench, pop these bolts off here, these little nuts. These come right off here. And I found out there's no bearings in here, just bushings. And the grease goes in the middle of the two bushings. It comes out in a hole in the middle. So basically you got to grease them and spin them at the same time to get grease to come out of there. So I cleaned them up pretty good, and I'm going to take them all apart because I didn't know there. I thought there was a bearing in there or something. I really didn't even pay attention, but they spin pretty easy. But like you say, they don't actually ride on the ground all the time. You know, these have been on for 3-4 months, and one of them's a little bit worn than the other. I might have had it down too low, but you set the deck for your variation what you want. You set these a 1/4 inch higher, so they only hit when you go over a hill or a bump or something. So, but it's a little sloppy. So the bushings do wear out, so you got to keep greasing them. So I'm going to grease these up good, and I'm going to take the grease gun and just kind of fill them with grease with a bolt off, with a nut off, so I can see it come out. Oh yeah, it fills right up. So that's what I'm going to do. Grease all these babies up and get them ready to go back on the deck. So that way, at least for sure, you can tighten this right up because it doesn't push on the bushing. It just bottoms out on the frame. And there's a little cap that goes on that keeps the grease in. So I'm going to do all 4 of these and put these back on the deck, and we'll go from there. Okay, well, I think I'm done. I can't put these bogey wheels back on, these 2 wheels. I got them all greased up, but I can't put them on because I have my rollers installed on the bottom rack, so that's so I can wheel it around the garage, keep it standing up. But everything's done. Everything's back together. Everything's torqued up to specs. Top wheels are on. This is all greased up good. Everything's greased. Everything's tight. Everything's torqued. Put a bungee strap on here just to keep that up out of the way when I'm dragging around the floor. Everything's good. The paint's drying. Everything's tight. So I think this will keep it from rusting out. Here's some pictures of what it looks like if you don't do something. You have to at least paint this thing once in a while, because it does wear out. When you're cutting the sand from the grass pickup, it actually sandblasts the paint off. So this probably won't last forever, but at least it's better than not having nothing on there for sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and set it back down on the floor and get ready to, I think I'm gonna take the blower apart and check that out. Well, there she is back on the floor. So I think I'm going to store this out under the deck. It doesn't really need to be inside the garage. So it's definitely ready for summer. I don't have to do anything else to it other than take off the delivery wheels and the support wheels on the bottom that I made, and put on the other scalping wheels. That's it. She's all cleaned up, all stored, ready to go. Everything's all greased up. So all we gotta do is wheel it out to the deck. Underneath the deck would be a good spot for it. So this is actually a good way to work on this thing, other than picking it up like I did, but my back's so sore I decided to hang it up on the workbench a little bit so I could get off the ground. Otherwise I'd be on my knees. That would kill me. But anyways, one job done, ready for the next one. We're going to go right ahead and work on this blower tonight or tomorrow. I'm going to take it apart and clean it all out so we can see what it is. That's the blower that goes on the deck. That's the reason I don't put the flipper back on, because it's just in the way when you put the blower on there in the chute. So I just leave that off I actually had it off since I bought the machine, so we'll just leave it out there. But we have it in case we want to put it back on. Alright, tomorrow's the blower project.